Ebola virus, the bacteria that causes plague, a pandemic strain of flu. If any of these pathogens could be turned into bioweapons by terrorists or rogue nation-states, they would threaten humanity. Most life scientists have little awareness of biosecurity issues, according to a National Academies report released today. And it says there are multiple shortcomings in the systems designed to stop potentially risky research from being published. A new process for 3D printing things could pave the way for lighter, faster aircraft that potentially fly further on the same amount of fuel. Today's airplanes are held together with thousands of metal rivets and fasteners. That's because the lightweight but strong aluminum alloys used for their frames are considered unwieldable. Try to weld them and you get a phenomenon called hot cracking, in which the finished alloy weakens and fractures as it cools. This and other adverse welding effects also stand in the way of 3D printing high-strength aluminum alloy parts. When researchers have tried, the resulting laser-fused mass flakes away at the welding area like a stale biscuit. Popular ride-sharing firm Uber has had its license to operate in London revoked in a surprise move by the city's regulator. There were multiple reasons for the decision. TfL cited the company's approach to reporting criminal offences. In August, a senior officer within London's Metropolitan Police Service wrote to TfL about Uber's slowness to report a passenger's accusation that her driver had sexually assaulted her. TfL said it was also concerned about how Uber obtained medical certificates and criminal records checks for drivers. The straw that broke the camel's back may have been the company's Greyball software, an internal application that Uber may have used to block regulators' oversight of the Uber app.
Another arm of the United States government was the FSA, the Farm Security Administration, and they had a peculiar task, because in addition to the depression, which had obviously hit farmers quite hard because suddenly the material that they were producing wasn't really as value, yet their costs for producing it were exactly the same, they were hit not only that but also by another problem, which was the Dust Bowl, and the Dust Bowl was this terrible drought that hit the American West and Southwest especially, and caused terrible economic problems for those farmers. I'm going to argue that the tremendous increases in productivity that we associate with the Industrial Revolution originate not so much from changes in science or technology or new inventions, where England was far from unique, as from changes in attitudes towards morality, towards what constituted the good. Attitudes towards property, which became in England individuals long before it did on the continent. Attitudes toward the proper role of government. And together, these attitudes constitute much of what the Luddites were protesting against. We are trying to understand the locomotion of one of our closest living relatives, which is the orangutan, and also the locomotion of all of the apes and the common ancestor of humans and the other apes. And in that area, we have had a big problem traditionally, and that we know a lot about how they move around the forest. I've been out to the forest and spent a year recording the different types of locomotion they use, but we have no idea about the energetic cost of how they move around the forest and the solutions that they find to problems of moving around the canopy. And what we're doing here is using the park or athletes as an analogy for a large-bodied ape moving around a complex environment and getting them to move around in the course that we've made that they've never seen before. And we're going to record their energetic expenditure while they're doing it. Asteroid collisions can be, just ask the dinosaurs, but they also bring key ingredients for life. Super-Earths can draw them to nearby worlds. Super-Earths, planets that are up to 10 times more massive than Earth, might play billiards with planetary systems. New simulations suggest that if a super-Earth existed in our own solar system, say between Venus and the Earth, far more asteroids would collide with us. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, if the timing is right. Understanding the effect of these massive planets on others nearby could help direct the search for life on exoplanets. If you have paraskevidecatria, today is not your day. That's right, paraskevidecatria is fear of Friday the 13th and the accidents, mishaps, and misfortunes thought by some to occur on that day. But is there anything really to fear? In fact, a study was conducted and published back in 1993 in the British Medical Journal that looked at hospital admissions due to accidents on one Friday the 13th compared with the previous Friday the 6th. It's tough to pick a familiar face out of a crowd, but focusing on a known voice in a noisy room is easy. And a new study scanned volunteers' brains to look at how we solve the so-called cocktail party problem. The work is in the journal Nature. Researchers recorded the activity of the subjects' cerebral cortexes while playing them sentences spoken by different voices. First, the subjects listened to individual sentences and reported key features of each one. Then, they heard two different sentences played at the same time, but had to listen to and recall details from only one voice. Each voice drew a particular response from the auditory cortex. The study included 1/3 million drivers involved in fatal crashes. 2 years ago, the research group found that morbidly obese people were 56% more likely to die in a car crash than normal weight car occupants. The new study revealed that drivers of normal weight are 67% more likely to wear a seatbelt than are obese drivers, which could account for at least part of the increased death risk. The researchers hypothesized that overweight people find belts uncomfortable and difficult to buckle. A weight loss program can address the problem in the long run. An inexpensive seat belt extension can solve it today. It was fixed and unchangeable and things happen on it, just as people walk around. So the stars, the comets, and the planets, and the other heavenly bodies moved around and traced down their parts on this completely unchanging stage of space. In the 20th century, as the result of Einstein's work, that view of the universe was completely transformed. We began to understand that there was no absolutely fixed stage of space at all on which all celestial notions were played out. But in some sense on the larger scale in the universe, the space itself was in this state of a continuous dynamic change. That was a prediction made by Einstein. But wasn't Einstein herald the owner of making the discovery that our universe was really like that?
Well, it takes about maybe 3 seconds thought to realize that moving power down to the states, in funding and so on, is just moving it away from the people, for a perfectly elementary reason. There's a hidden part of the system, of the power system that you're not supposed to know about, or think about, and that's private power. Because of our mounting credit card debt and monthly payments that far exceed our family's incomes, and my kids will also join the class of citizens who can't rely on their parents for college support. Do I wish I'd chosen another educational route? You bet. Perhaps trade school. I thought that being a plumber might not be such a bad gig. As long ago as the reign of Charles II, the main concern was the production of smoke from the burning of sea coal. Almost all areas of trade and industry were subject to very detailed legislative controls at that time, although some were governed by self-regulation in the form of guilds, which regulated both supply and methods of production. However, the measures implemented were mostly ineffective because then, as now, the specifying of legal duties and standards without providing any appropriate enforcement merely indicated good intentions but were of little practical effect. The next stage was prompted by the Industrial Revolution with the urbanization of society and its profound effects on the environment.
What would happen if I asked you to think about what you're doing with your knee while you're doing that? There's a good chance you'd fall on your face. We as humans only have the ability to pay attention to so much at once, which is why, by the way, it's not a good idea to drive and talk on the cell phone and under pressure. When we're concerned about performing at our best, we can try and control aspects of what we're doing that should be left outside conscious control. The end result is that we mess up. My research team and have studied this phenomenon of overattention, and we call it paralysis by analysis.
On August 13, 1961, the barbed wire was rolled out of Berlin to create the Berlin Wall. For nearly 30 years until it was dismantled, wall jokes proliferated especially among those living in the East. Laughing was all that was left. Jokes about those who rule and sometimes those who tyrannize you are a form of folklore that has existed in societies as seemingly different as communist Eastern Europe, Tsarist Russia, modern Egypt, 12th century Persia and modern-day Iran. Humor can also be wonderfully subversive. They can protect self-respect and identity. In more totalitarian societies, laughter relieves, at least temporarily, the pressures and anxiety of political oppression. Political jokes may not in themselves topple dictators, but they can provide solace. In a democracy like our own, perhaps the trouble with political jokes is that they sometimes get elected. So today we're going to finish talking about the fat-soluble vitamins. I'm going to start with vitamin D. And I think probably most of you know that vitamin D is called the sunshine vitamin. And it's called that because there's absolutely no dietary need for vitamin D if you get adequate sunshine. And the real important word there is it is because it turns out that in climates which aren't near the equator there's a big question as to whether or not using these you get adequate sunshine. And that's important because foods are not naturally abundant in vitamin D. And that's why milk is fortified, but the fortification may not be enough. So again, just exposure to sunlight is adequate, no need for vitamin D. So vitamin D really isn't the vitamin, it's a prohormone. When human beings evolve, we evolved in tropical climates and ran around naked.
Last month I published alongside my annual report a subject report on the development of citizenship in schools. The report celebrates the success of some schools in implementing the citizenship curriculum. It praises those schools where there have been substantial developments in the subject, and which now go a long way towards fulfilling national curriculum requirements. In the report we are critical of schools which have not taken citizenship seriously, either through reluctance or lack of capacity to make appropriate provision in the curriculum.
A leader can define or clarify goals by issuing a memo or an executive order, an edict or a fatwa or a tweet, by passing a law, barking a command, or presenting an interesting idea in a meeting of colleagues. Leaders can mobilize people's energies in ways that range from subtle, quiet persuasion to the coercive threat or the use of deadly force. Sometimes a charismatic leader, such as Martin Luther King Jr., can define goals and mobilize energies through rhetoric and the power of example. We can think of leadership as a spectrum, in terms of both visibility and the power the leader wields. On one end of the spectrum, we have the most visible, authoritative leaders. In practice, though many multi-level marketing companies make it all but impossible for members to profit purely through sales, and many pyramid schemes, like Vema Nutrition, disguise themselves as legal multi-level marketing businesses, using a product or service to hide the pay and recruit structure. Many pyramid schemes also capitalize on already existing trust within churches, immigrant communities, or other tightly knit groups. The first few members are encouraged to report a good experience before they actually start making a profit. Others in their network follow their example, and the schemes balloon in size before it comes clear that most members aren't actually profiting. The kinds of actions that people often associate with OCD, like excessive hand washing, or checking things repeatedly, may be examples of obsessive or compulsive tendencies that many of us exhibit from time to time. But the actual disorder is far more rare and can be quite debilitating. People affected have little or no control over their obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors, which tend to be time-consuming and interfere with work, school, or social life to the point of causing significant distress. This set of diagnostic criteria is what separates people suffering from OCD from those who may just be a bit more meticulous or hygiene obsessed than usual.